I'm gonna go ahead and get started here. Anybody that we missed, we'll try to come back to you as we finish up here. I'm sure there's going to be maybe some questions and answers at the end, and some comments and feedback. But Roger, I'm going to turn it over to you for your introduction, and Linda's if she's wants to do that, and then just go right ahead on into your talk. And Roger, thank you for doing this. We're all looking forward to hearing it.
Well, welcome everybody. Excited tonight to talk a little bit about our family history and to do some exploring with you guys. And I've missed seeing our meetings, and it's been great to hear from everybody things that have been happening not only in your lives but activities that you've been doing nationwide. And this is always one of the wonderful things about these family meetings. We get to get glimpses of who each of us are and a little bit of insight about what we do in the world. And so tonight I wanted to spend some time talking about a fairly esoteric matter that I only know a little bit about. So I'm gonna sort of break this up into a couple of different segments, but I wanted to start off talking about Pawnee bundles in general. And so Kelly, I asked Kelly if she'd look into the pronunciation of this Pawnee word. There are various Pawnee words for bundles. And so the most formal word is present in different versions in the South Band and in the Skeety dialects. And Kelly and I and a few other family members are right now taking some Pawnee language classes. And so I asked Kelly if she'd look into figuring out how to pronounce these words. Kelly.
So the South Band word that you gave me for Sacred Bundle is pronounced Su'urere Piru. Su'urere Piru. There's that glottal stop in the middle. Lance and Tyler say that some people pronounce that glottal stop, that stop between tsu and u, and some people just slide it over. So it could possibly be pronounced Su'urere Piru. In Skeety, it would be Tsuhadi Piru. Slightly different. Tsuhadi Piru.
Now I have the impression that that opening sound should be more of a CH sound. That's how I've seen it spelled elsewhere. And so let me hear you pronounce it, but with a CH sound. See, the C designation has several different pronunciations. So that's something that isn't clear in the transcription that I have of these terms, which of those pronunciations, but I've seen the word spelled. I should have sent you the other spelling. I think it starts with
Mm,
a CH rather than the
mhm.
T sound that you used.
Yeah, so I went back to the Pawnee language classes, and the C without the rooftop on it, they said was pronounced with TS, and then a C with the rooftop is pronounced CH. But
And
the spelling,
it should have the caret on there. That's called a caret in
a carrot.
linguistics. And
Okay.
so it is with the CH.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if it has the carrot, then it is CH. So it would be Cha'udere Piru. Cha'udere Piru. Yeah.
And how do you spell that?
To Peru,
Yeah.
and that's
So
a
it's the,
Southland
yeah,
term.
yeah. Cha'udere Piru.
And for the Skiti, Peru,
Tahari Piru.
Peru,
Yeah.
Peru.
Di Piru. Yes, you are correct.
Now, this term, in the two dialects. It has a really interesting translation. This word is made up of several other words. The opening sound of it, the opening of it is the Pawnee word for rain. And so that's true of both of these versions. Now, in the rest of the word in both versions, I think it means pretty much the same thing. There may be some slight variations that I'm not tuned into. But the term as a whole is always translated as rains wrapped up. That's how it's usually translated now in the Skeety version. And I think in the South Band version too. It makes reference to a string, and not just the buffalo-eyed rapper, but it makes reference to a string. And so that's what the second part of the word in the Skeety term is. It refers to a hair tie, a braid tie, some kind of a string. It refers to a string, I believe, that you find wrapped around the base of a mother corn that's inside of some of these bundles. And this string has a significance to it. The string, according to one thing that I've seen, here's what is said about it. It is symbolic of the road between humankind and the gods, the divinities, the celestial deities. And so this rains wrapped up refers to rain and to this journey, this path between humankind and the celestial divinities. So that's a very interesting name. Now, the word rain, it has further dimensions of meaning to it. So now keep in mind, these are terms that apply to the most formal Pawnee bundles. And I'll get to some distinctions about that in a little bit here. But the word rain, I think it refers to the Evening Star bundle and to the creative process that happened that accounted for the origin of humankind. So let me tell you, I'm going to quote here from a story told by a Skeety priest named Scout Roaming the World, or as he's known in the literature, Roaming Scout. One of the great Skeety priests. He's talking about the Skeety creation story. And in this
Roger, I don't know if you can hear us.
Lucy.
Oh, there you're back. You froze for a minute.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I was about to read this passage here from this creation story, Skeety creation story. Here's what he said. The storm passed over the earth, and all at once a funnel-shaped cloud touched the earth. Then the clouds arose, and there stood the little girl upon the earth. Hence, the Pawnee got the name Suraki, or rain standing, the name for the girl. And so this term, I think it's either Suraki or Churaki. I've heard it pronounced that way, Churaki. The first part of this, I'm not sure, but it looks like, again, the word for rain. And the second part has two dimensions to it. It's a fusion of two words. One is the term for to stand, be standing, and the other, the end of it, the last syllable is a diminutive, so little. So the word really means little standing rain. And so the evening star is the one of the primary creative forces that in Pawnee ideology accounts for the origin of humankind. And the name for the first person who was put on Earth has to do with rain standing, and evening star was one of the two forces that gave rise to this little girl. And so this bundle, the name that is given to these formal Bonnie bundles, it refers to this celestial creation story. It refers to the origins of humankind itself. It has references in it to the evening star and to this little rain standing, this little girl. And so that is sort of the language background for the term that's applied to one class of Bonnie bundles. And so here's what that class of bundles really stands for in Bonnie history. There are two general classes. Now this can be divided up in various ways, two classes of these special bundles. One of these classes has this term applied to it, and this background of imagery and narrative associations with this class of bundles. These bundles, the Kitkaki, the Pitawirata, the Chawi, the Skeety, and all the Skeety bands, the subgroups. There's like between 15 and 18 of these subgroups among the Skeety. Each one is centered on one of these bundles. And so the bundles account for the political and ceremonial organization of the Pawnee world. And so in Skeety traditions, these communities came together, all of them except for two Skeety communities. They came together to form this federation. And I would suggest this happened about 700 years ago. And each of these communities had a bundle with a name and with components in the bundle that some of those components had names as well. But each of these bundles had a name and they were associated with a star in one direction or another. And they took their names from these bundles. And so they got together and created this federation. And they organized themselves so that they conducted a great annual ceremony to symbolize the founding of this federation. And among the South Band Pawnees, a different process happened, organizing under the umbrella of one bundle known as the Kawarakis bundle. And each of these descendant bundles became one of the other Pawnee bands. And so the bundles are at the center of community life.
Roger, you froze again. I don't know if you can hear me. Is Roger's screen freezing for everyone else, or is it just me?
Yes, no, it's freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Let me see if I can chat him a message. I don't know.
If he's having internet bandwidth trouble, he could try shutting off the camera. That might be part of it.
That's a good point. took me this long to type. You froze. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Barb, can you help? Can you give a phone call to Roger?
Oh, he's back.
It might be the internet here in Longmont. I remember a message that we were going to have some upgrades this weekend and spotty service.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it. Anyways, not sure where I was when I left off, but I was trying to explain the general meanings of how these bundles operate in the Pawnee world. The bundles are at the center of Pawnee storytelling and again of the identity systems in the Pawnee world. The leaders of the communities, they were the technical owners. They cared physically for the bundles. They kept them in their homes, but there's a more elaborate system of managing these items. The women were the ones who actually cared for the bundles and were entrusted with knowing the names of the different ears of corn and things like that, and carrying and making sure everything was okay and for transporting these bundles when they moved. And so the women were owners of a kind. They were entrusted with this knowledge. Now, the bundles were the center of ceremonial activity and of narrative storytelling as well. And so the people who managed that were a different class of people. These were the priests in Pawnee land. And so the leader who owned the bundle, the women who managed the bundles, um, they they were not entrusted with knowing the traditions, the stories, the ceremonial activities associated with the bundles. This was entrusted to the priestly class. And so there's an elaborate community-wide system for managing these items in the Pawnee world, very important items. And that is the general outline for bundles and their significance in the Pawnee world. Now, there is a second class of bundles that I'm not sure exactly how separate they are in terms of these traditions, the ways that are associated with these bundles, but they have a different character. They're more individually owned items. And one distinction that is mentioned in Pawnee tradition is that these community bundles with this special name, referring to the rain and the evening star, these had to do with celestial matters, with maintaining food and certain things like that in the world, like corn growing and things like that. And the other class of bundles has more to do with animal powers and earthly powers and healing and things like that. Now, when I said to Lance, let's put the name for the main kind of bundle on there, I hadn't really thought through. I I don't know what our family bundle, what it consisted of, and its full significance. But I don't think it was in this first class. I think it comes in this second class. Now, in the second class, this would be termed a karusa. A karusa. Now, this refers to a container of some kind, a sack, a bag, and this is a more This is a different kind of a name for these bundles, but I think they partake of all of the essences that I described. They are part of this bundle world, this system, but they are individually owned things. They're repositories of more family-oriented traditions and stories and things like that. And so, like I say, I don't know the nature of our family bundle. I will offer some comments on that in just a little bit, but I wanted to pause right here and ask if anybody has questions or observations or corrections to what I've said.
Roger, were these bundles usually wrapped in buffalo skin or deer skin or any skin? Was there any guideline as to what they were wrapped in?
The only hide that I've heard mentioned is buffalo hide.
It is buffalo.
So
Okay.
I don't know if that is standard for, all of them or if there was some variation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's turn to our family bundle. Uncle Bruce told me in 1982, he said, and I'm going to quote from what he said. I tape recorded his discussion with me, and I made notes of various kinds. This is from some notes I made in November 1982. He said, Old Man Echohawk was a doctor. He had a bundle. Some of this bundle survives in the family today. In my care, said Uncle Bruce. This consists of a bow and bowstring, a gourd, and an eagle bone whistle. So, four items associated with this bundle that was owned by Old Man Echohawk, mentioned in conjunction with him being a doctor. So that was what Uncle Bruce told me. Then, some months later, he said something else about these items. He said Big Crow was part of the Rarista, and he called it the cedar dance ceremony. And he mentioned the gourd and the bow, and using the bow as a staff and using the gourd to sing with. So the items in the bundle, the items that Uncle Bruce had in his care at this time, they were associated according to a term I didn't know. And for years I looked around, I couldn't figure out what this term meant, what it applied to. And cedar dance ceremony, it didn't mean that. So it doesn't have the word cedar in there. So I don't know exactly how that fit, but the term that he used in Pawnee, the rarista, something like that. That is well known. I finally came across what that refers to. It refers to the deer dance, the deer society. It's also known sometimes as the whistle dance. And it has two components to it. The first part refers to a lance, which is a word that's sometimes used in place of dance. And so a lance, and then the second part, one syllable, ta, refers to a deer. So a deer lance is what this term really refers to. Lance deer is the literal translation of this name for this society and their ceremonial practice that they engaged in. Now, as Kelly and I learned in class the other day, this word "ta" for deer, it might not be a Pawnee word. I found it in the Oto dictionary, the same exact word meaning deer. So it might be borrowed. Now, this is interesting because I'll get to this. It's a little bit later. Um, but in general, this term that Uncle Bruce used for the ceremony that these bundle parts were used in is an actual ceremony. Now, there's a story told by a Pita Awirata named, his name was a fox roaming the world, roaming fox. He told a story that is an origin of the deer dance. Now, each of the Pawnee, Akitaru, the bands or tribes, each of the separate sovereign communities, they tended to have their own separate societies with separate origins and that sort of thing. So you can read about the Skeety deer dance in Gene Welfish's The Lost Universe. I'm not sure how much the history that's given there applies to the other groups, but this is the story that we have about the origin of the deer dance as told among the Pita Wirata. So I don't know, well, this applies to all of the bands, but this story sounds to me like the origin of the whole ceremonial complex in Pawnee land. No, I'm not going to read the whole story, but I'll tell you what it says in general. It starts off saying, many, many years ago, a man wandered away from the village and was for many years upon the mountains. So he was in the mountains somewhere. Now, we don't know where, but the prominent place in Pawnee tradition is the area that is known as Pikes Peak today. It has a Pawnee name, and the area around it has a Pawnee name as well. And this place is mentioned in various Pawnee traditions, especially as an origin place for the cultivation of corn. And so this is a place that's associated with the beginnings of corn cultivation and buffalo hunting. It's also a place where the heavens touch the earth and where dreams come from the celestial realm to the earth. And it's a portal to spirit land. And so it has all of these different kinds of very powerful meanings. Now, in this story here, a man wanders to the mountains and he has a dream. He lives in the mountains for a long time. Doesn't say how long, but he lives there for a long time. And he has a dream and he sees a man who talks to him in the dream and tells him, I am the messenger in a deer dance, which is being carried out right now at the foot of the mountains in a cave. And he has instructions. The people there, they want him to go and join and learn about this ceremony. And so he goes and he finds the cave and he goes in there. And then something happens in there, and I'm going to read another segment from this oral tradition set down, published in 1906, told by, I don't know who this man is, Fox Roaming the World is the translation of his name. He's given the name Roaming Fox by Murray and Dorsey in this 1906 publication. The people in the cave began to eat the red beans which grow in the south, and they gave the man some of the red beans to eat. After a while, he became sick, for the beans were very strong. He fell down and lay there as if he were dead. While he lay there, he went into the heavens, where he saw Tirawat. Tirawat was sitting in an earth lodge. He held a bow in his left hand and bunches of wild sage in his right. Now, this man has this vision, and it comes from partaking of their sacrament in this ceremony. He calls it red beans. Now, I found a fragment of a document at the Field Museum one time. Here's what it says. It's titled Elk Dance, South Star, and Red Berries. This appears to be a fragment of a longer account that is probably available in the papers there, but I didn't see it. The South Star next spoke, saying, "You have placed me in the South where I receive the dead. I also deserve to have a dance in my honor. I'm going to put some seeds on the ground on which shall grow red berries, and they shall be wonderful. The people shall have dances, and when they have eaten these berries, they shall fall down as if dead. They shall come to me, and I shall teach them my secrets. This dance shall be known as the elk or deer dance." And so we see here a combination of the various ideas that encircle the Pikes Peak area. In the Pawnee term for Pikes Peak, it's, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it means the mountain that reaches the sky. This is pretty much the translation that some Pawnee scouts gave it in interviews in 1923. And they also attached another name to this mountain, and it's written out as, and it looks like on the page something like Deuce Pay, and I could not figure out what that means until recently I came across this term in the Skeety dictionary. The spow, the spow. It means mountains. It means mounds. It means hills covered with seeds. Now, there's a story told by another man who was a Pawnee Scout. These Pawnee Scout interviews in 1923, they spent time in Colorado. And this is what they talked about. They all talked about this mountain and the region around it. And another Pawnee who was on that scouting expedition, he told this story, which was published, in which he used this term, mountains covered with seeds. Now, I didn't know what that meant until I came across this. And so the full name of this area is the mountain that reaches the sky. It's located where the mountains are covered with seeds. And so what kind of seeds? Well, this is the place where the origin of corn cultivation was said to have begun. But now we have this other story in which this person lives in the mountains, and he's given this ceremony to take home with him that has to do with the ground being covered with seeds. It all fits together. And so I think this very old story that accounts for the origin of the Deer Society, the deer dance, and all of these things that are associated with it. Now, Muri also wrote about the Rarista, the Deer Society. He said the fundamental elements of the ritual seem to be based upon the mescal bean. For this society teaches that all animal powers were learned through the power of the mescal bean. While the name of the society is taken from the generic, and this term in the dictionary is said to be obsolete, so an archaic term, the word for deer, ta, probably from a neighboring language. The dancers imitate many kinds of animals.
Looks like we froze again, Roger. I don't know if you're hearing me in your frozen state. I don't know if, well, I'll wait till you come back, but
Studying Ecohawk was a community leader after about 1906, 1908, that general time period. And so this bundle, wherever he got it from, was a part of his doctoring activities. And it was also when this deer dance was held, I assume that he may have been one of the community leaders that's mentioned, where the bow and the gourd are laid out in a particular part during the ceremony. And the mescal bean was used. Now, the mescal bean is also present among many other communities, especially toward the south, but including the Otos. There's an account in papers that were put together from an expedition, an American expedition in 1820, where they came to the Colorado mountains, and there they met some travelers. I think they were, if I remember correctly, they were Cheyenne. And the Cheyenne said, "Here's my prized possession." He opened up his bundle and he brought out a little bag of these mescal beans. And the trader, the interpreter, the fur trader was from Pawnee land, and he told the other Americans, he said, "Oh, I know what this is. I've seen this in the doings of a special society among the Otos. And their society leader, his name is Jongo Tongo, Songi Tonga, Shanatona. This is the distant ancestor of Richard Shanatona, who is ancestral to various branches of our family." And he said, "These guys use this, and these beans are so valuable. Just a few beans are worth the value of a horse." And so he thought this was something very special, and they were traded here and there. Now, these mescal beans, I think they're grown in northern Mexico, maybe across the river up into Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, but they're from the far south. And so I don't know if Ecohawk participated in ceremonies where they made use of this mescal bean, but he must have participated in the doings of the Deer Society, the deer dance, in which these items could have been used. So this is the little bit that I know. Now, I have another thing that I want to add that Uncle Bruce told me about all this, but I'd like to pause right here, and if you guys have comments, if you think I've gotten something wrong, maybe you've heard something different, I would really be glad to hear what you have to say. But if you have comments or questions at this point, please ask.
I just want to thank you for this. This is fascinating. I'm
Thank you.
typing a bunch of notes as you're talking.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I will echo that. Wow, Uncle Roger, this is powerful and priceless. I can't wait to tell my sons this. Thank you so much.
Now I'll finish up with one more quote and some observations. Uncle Bruce told me in 1982. Here's what he said. I tape recorded this, so this is exactly what he said. Old Man Ecohawk had a bundle which was different from other Pawnee bundles in that there were no restrictions on the kinds of behavior appropriate in the presence of the bundle. For instance, around most bundles, people were forbidden to whistle or stir food with metal implements, but not around Ecohawk's bundle. And so when you look at Pawnee bundles in general, there are all kinds of rules which the women were supposed to keep track of and to make sure that they were appropriately observed in the households. A long list of things that applied to Pawnee bundles. But in the Echohawk bundle, there were no rules whatsoever. No rules. Now, when Uncle Bruce told me this, I was sitting with him out west, and he paused, and he got a look on his face and the tone of his voice. He wanted to say more about this, and we had a couple more conversations about this later, in which he struggled to articulate what he wanted to say. But I think what he wanted to say is something that he said to me about other things concerning our family. What his view was that our family is different than other Pawnee families. Our family does not fit in with other Pawnee families. Now, I don't know where this bundle came from. I would suggest that it may have come from one of the 7 brothers who, Echohawk's father was one of those brothers. It could have come from one of his marriages. That's possible as well. And I'm guessing, Kelly, that Carrie West, Norman Echohawk Sacto, I'm guessing she had a hand in caring for this bundle when she was a part of the Echohawk household. I don't know if you guys know anything about this bundle. Maybe it came from your side of the family. I don't know where it came from, but I do know that Uncle Bruce, he was, I think, shy to talk about what he thought it meant. And I've given a lot of thought to this myself. And here's one observation I have about it. We each get to gather up the things that we know and learn about our family heritage and make sense of those things ourselves in our own lives. And so where these traditions fit in with our decisions about things, the paths we take, the destinations we have in mind, you can ignore this, this heritage, or you can shape it how you want. But ultimately, this is something we share, however we relate to it, each of us as individuals. So we're individuals. We have our own paths, but this is our communal shared history, our heritage. And I would suggest that it deserves to mean something. And in this case, what this bundle meant was that rules are important. Traditions are important. The way things are is important. But sometimes your life goes in a direction that breaks the rules. And I think in our family heritage, this is the path that this bundle signifies. That's what I make of this. And so, I think for each one of us, whatever I think and do and say about all this, I've tried to set forth the little bits of knowledge I have about these deep matters. And you each get to decide for yourselves what you make of this. So thanks so much for listening.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you, Roger. There's a lot there to take in. If people are formulating some questions, just unmute your mic and ask them. I do have a question. You know, there's a lot of, when I hear you talk, there's a lot of deep history that has to do with that, you know, out west, the Rocky Mountain area. And if I understand right, I think what you're saying is that um, the Pawnees migrated from west to east out into the plains. And is I also hear or thought that there was another narrative that the Pawnees moved up from the south somewhere. So am I mixed up on these? Are there two competing narratives, or can you say just a little bit about that deep history?
Yes, that's a really important question, and maybe a future meeting we'll explore this in some detail. I wanted to talk at some point specifically about the Pikes Peak area, the mountain that reaches the sky, and outline that and put it into more of a historical context. But the long and short of it is that when you study Pawnee oral traditions and you look at the archaeological record, I think it's important to integrate those to the degree that it's possible to do that. And now, my viewpoint on this is not shared in archaeology among scholars of Pawnee land. My view is very different. My view is that a scattered population across a broad region, so people who lived in various places across the plains and the central plains over to the Missouri River and up against the Colorado Front Range down into New Mexico. Scattered groups related to each other. They spoke similar languages. They identified in different ways, but over time they slowly came together. And the main Pawnee migration story talks about a migration of a lot of people from sometimes it's the southeast and sometimes it's the southwest. Now, mostly it's the southwest, and I think it's these people who lived within sight of the mountain that reaches the sky, and they developed a lot of these ideas that are central to what it means to be Pawnee. And long ago, they carried these ideas into Pawnee land about the time the Skeety Federation was founded. They made their way to the Mississippi River, it says the story, and up to where, no, it's not the Mississippi River, the Dark River. They made their way up to the Mysterious River. That's the Missouri River, the Mysterious River. And they dwelt there for a while. Now there's a great city that's just right across from there called Cahokia. And I think the Pawnees had doings with the people around there. And then they moved up the Mysterious River and they joined other relatives who lived in the plains who were ancestral, who were shaping the Skeety Federation. And all of these different groups, they interacted in complex ways, including some groups that were not Pawnee. There's a Skeety tradition about the Badger people, whose language was not intelligible to the Pawnees, but their songs survived generation after generation. And so these were not necessarily all closely related people. We shouldn't see Pawnee history as a monolith, but instead as a gathering of people from across a broad region over a long period of time. So hopefully in the future we can talk in more detail about this.
All right, well, thank you. Are there other questions out there or comments?
That your question, Lance, is very much what I was wondering also, because I've read the accounts of Pikes Peak and then also the stories of the coming from the southeast. or Southwest, and it is interesting to try to reconcile all of those. And then I have been doing a lot of my own reading about the mound builders in Cahokia and wondered how that fit into it. So I like your idea, Roger. I think that sounds plausible as well as very interesting.
Yeah, well, maybe we should have a follow-up night on that. I was interested in the how the Uncle Bruce described the Echo Hawks being different in some manner, and I'm just wondering if there's any comments that people have or observations about all that.
That rings really true for this side of the family. Grandpa would say we're different, and even my mom, we're different. We never. Well, Grandpa took it in kind of the Pawnee text, the Pawnee context. Mom just kind of took it in general. But when I heard Roger say that, rules are important, traditions are important, but it's like, wow, I feel like I'm listening to Grandpa all over again. So that really, really rings true for this small branch of the family.
Yeah.
Roger, this is Lucille. I have a couple of questions. Say more, mainly you talk about the role of men and the sacred bundles. What exactly is the role of women? Are women in our nation able to do other than care for bundles? Can we possess them? Can they be handed down to us as well?
That is a really important question. One way I would answer that is that Pawnee women who had in their families keeping one of these special communal bundles, this was a matter of great pride and esteem and dedication. And the women were, they, you know, they drew their worlds so that they would spend quality time working with these bundles, and doing things like making sure that when they were growing corn, for example, that the whole management of corn was all in the women's world. And for the communal bundles, I think I wish I knew more about this. I would need to study this more carefully. But they had corn in there that Deb and Ronnie could tell you about. That's termed mother corn. And this is like the heart of these bundles. There's all kinds of things. There's birds. There's all kinds of things in these bundles, typically speaking. But the mother corn for these communal bundles was essential. And so I would say another thing, putting it with what I said, if any woman in the Echo Hawk family wanted to have a bundle, I would be all for it. The other Pawnees might not approve, but so be it.
Our family is unique, so. My other question is, you speak about the three bands of the Pawnee as being really in many ways very separate. So did the tradition and the practices around the sacred bundles, did they differ? You talk about the skidi particularly a lot. How about the kitkihaki? Do we see some things different where sacred bundles are concerned that doesn't align with what the skidi practice and think?
I need to study that a little more carefully, but there are differences. The skidi bundles, they come from these communities that each had their origin stories, and a celestial divinity. They were all separate. But the South bands all arose from the umbrella of one bundle called the Kawarakis bundle. Now, this bundle in the South Band tradition is said to be the oldest bundle of them all. And so there are some differences, but I am not conversant enough. I would need to study more carefully. Now, there's a story that's told by our great grandmother that was recorded by Dorsey and Muri, in which she outlined the character of the different Pawnee Akitaru, the bands or tribes, and of the Kitkaki, she said, "We are the people of the stones." And what she meant by that is not entirely clear to me. But there's a lot to say about that. There's a lot to explore about that. And I want to get to her stories at some point in our gatherings here and talk about what I think her stories signify. So that might be a future chance to sort of look and see how this ties in with bundles and what I've said tonight.
Thank you.
My question is,
Oh, you turned.
okay, my question is, where is the bundle? You said Uncle Bruce had it. I don't, did I understand you to say that Uncle Bruce had the bundle?
Uncle Bruce had items from the bundle.
Items from the bundle, okay.
And if I recall correctly, it was his assumption that the bundle, the main part of it, was buried with Echolog. And the other items, a bowstring, a cord, and a whistle. These items were kept by Uncle Bruce, so they came out of the bundle. I'm guessing they went into George or Elmer's hands. And then Uncle Bruce, I wish I would have asked him, can you tell me more about how you wound up with these items? And now, this is a question, for Nito and Sherry. What happened when Uncle Bruce died? What happened to those things? He said he had them in his care. And so conceivably, these items are still out there with somebody in the family, but I don't know who has them.
That's interesting and important too. So thank you.
Roger, thanks for putting all this together. And I know we're just tapping into just one area of study that you've invested a lifetime in. So we really do enjoy hearing from you on these wide-ranging topics.
I do have, this is Gina, I do have a comment. At least living down here in Pawnee, it's kind of a rumor that the Pawnees are scared to even handle a bundle if we were to get them from museums. I'm not sure if anyone knows any details about that, but to me, it kind of seems like at least the people alive today are scared of them and don't want anything to do with them.
That's a really important point, Gina, and I'm glad you brought that up. Back in the late 90s, when Francis Morris was the repatriation person for the Pawnee Nation, I put together a plan for the Pawnees and submitted it to him. And he actually got angry at me and said that we're not going to do this. This is, people don't want to have anything to do with those bundles. They were put away, and we're not going to do this, Roger. My idea at the time, I was working at the Denver Art Museum. We had had conversations with the Pawnees and with several other communities about, if you're willing and you have a need, we will serve as a loan repository for anything you want that you feel like you can't take care of. Talk to us and we will hold things here on your behalf if that would be helpful to your heritage programs. And I wrote up a plan for the Pawnees to assert technical ownership over the variety of these communal bundles that are in museums now. And that they would go to whatever repository could be negotiated with, the Denver Art Museum, someplace where they could be held on behalf of the Pawnee people for when the Pawnees have their own system in place. And what I suggested to Francis Morris and the Culture Committee was that the Pawnees convene all of their religious people, the ceremonialists who are active in the Native American Church, who do funeral feasts, who do smoke offerings, pastors from the Indian churches who are Pawnee, people who have any kind of standing in the community as a holder of some kind of religious, spiritual tradition of some kind. I said it would be great if we could get all those people together, and if they could meet and be tasked with coming up with a plan for how we Pawnees could manage these things. And Francis said no, that he didn't want to have anything to do with it, nor did the elders he talked to. In fact, he said to me, he said, Roger, if you want to take these bundles, it's on your head. And of course, that was nothing that I had in mind. I just thought it would be nice if we had a national plan in Pawnee land. However qualified it might be for us to establish ownership and then to see if ways could be devised to somehow reintegrate these items back into Pawnee land. And, I think with the development of the new cultural center, I'm guessing that someday the time might be here for doing something like that.
I would completely support that, Roger. And speaking from my personal experience and spiritual quests, I think that's important. And I thank you for trying to do that in the 90s. I was not aware of that.
Hey, this is Deb. Yeah, it would be really nice to see that document that you sent to Francis Morris. Now that the chiefs, their office, and they'll be setting it up, those are the kinds of things that I think they'd be interested in. Because we do know that Francis Morris had a huge influence even over the chiefs. And I probably already told you about when he finally admitted or even offered an apology for his behavior towards bringing back the seeds, because he felt like that was something that shouldn't have ever been done. But with Pat leading Fox as the head chief, I'm sure he'd love to see that and have it reconsidered. with our seed project, things take a long time, and we uh, owe a lot of what we have to the bundles that the from the writing in family, from um, uh, Henry Stone Road's bundle he had. Um, we got a lot of our seeds back that way, and um, then with working with the Rickarraw with Jazz Young Bear, I spent 4 years working with him on um, how to care for our um, bundles, and they have 14 bundles up in Arikara country. And then there's the only corn bundle that I know of is one that's kept by two sisters and in Stillwater, and they refuse to open it, and it's a corn bundle. But so even though part of their family wants that spirituality, wants that opened, the two sisters are refusing to open it. So we've kind of, let them be. But in part of what we're doing for training seed keepers is, and the goal that we have for that, working with Jazz Young Bear, the Rickarraw, we'll be making sure that they have a bundle, are the 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 ones that are being trained to be seed keepers. During the our pandemic times, we've kind of stopped on that project, but now that we have our office and we're getting things kind of caught up, be getting back to that. But we do have a bundle right now for our corn. It's one that I have, and it's real. It's Oh, Ronnie could tell you some stories about that, but anyway, um, I'm just glad that we have something like that. It's a beginning. And we have people that are interested in, for example, with some of the dancers are wanting to start getting corn as part of their apparel. And so it's it's a process. There's another young man that's tanning some hides for our future bundles, and then we're also looking at replenishing some of the corn that's in museums like the Republic, and just replenishing is pretty much something that I believe that whenever somebody had a bundle that and they did open it, that those seeds were replenished. You had to put fresh ones in there, and so um, we're working along those lines. And I really enjoyed your talk, sir. It was a real drop the mic kind of talk, and appreciate everything you did to prepare for this, and presentation was very nice. Oh, love it. Thank you.
Deb, what kind of hide are they preparing?
Well, I hadn't even thought about that, because the one that I have mine and was made by oh golly, Jimmy Horn, and he made a parfleche, and so I'm not sure. It's in a parfleche bag. I'm not sure. I'm curious about that. Now, my, our nephew, Bobby Rubidoux, he can get us as many buffalo hides as we'd like. And he did a tanning on one. But it was real soft after it was tanned, and I could see how that could be durable, or soft enough to roll it up and to make the hide. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad you brought that point up as to that they use buffalo. So I'll check and see what the it's Lightfoot that's making that offered to tan the hides or to get the hides for the feed keepers. I'll have to double check with him. Thank you.
Well, we're
I
coming.
was maybe I was going to say kind of along the lines of what Aunt Deb said about replenishing. Well, first off, Uncle Raj thinks this is an awesome topic, and I do appreciate you sharing all of the information and just tirelessly looking for all of this information. It's really inspiring. And I think I got a chance to work a little bit with Francis Morris and hear some of his concerns a little bit about returning items, not on a deep level, but just in general. And I do think from my mom's side, we have a kind of a different relationship with culture in some aspects. Not in our family in particular, but just as a community in general. So I see that Francis Morris had a lot of wisdom. I know if somebody handed me something very meaningful, I'd be a little scared, how to take care of it or what to do or how to replenish it. So I would definitely be seeking advice. But I've known a lot of people that were medicine people, or their immediate families were medicine people, or they were in training to become a medicine person. And that idea of replenishing and of learning and replacing, of course, like knowing the way to do it, and doing it respectfully in the right way, but that is very much a big part of it. So if you had a bundle and some part of it broke, you would replace it. If you needed to replace the hide that it came in, you would replace it. And there would be certain ways that you would do that and go about and do it, but it was all 100% replaceable. I'm sure that there were probably some items in bundles that were not replaceable, that it had to be that exact object. But I think it is an interesting way to think about it. And I sympathize with everybody who has to look at that from every angle. And support the work that Aunt Deb is doing. And I can see why it's such a long process, because it's basically reviving traditions that haven't been practiced in a really long time. But it was really freeing to hear what you said about the Echo Hawk bundle, that it sounds like we have a lot less restrictions to know or keep in mind about offending it or miscaring for it. So that's really good to hear. But it is interesting, and I think it is vital that people think around and through these problems to build culture, because our other option is not to revive it and to just let it go. So as scary as it would be to undertake something like that, I would be like asking everybody that I knew, from related tribes, from unrelated tribes, and thinking it through, asking all of my elders, asking all of these people. I mean, I've talked with a couple of Pawnee people that had stories about bundles and stuff. So I definitely think it could be done, and it would have to be done in the right way. So thanks to everyone that's working on that.
Anyone else?
That was well said.
I was trying, this is Lucille, I'm trying to think how to phrase this, but you know, prior to going to Alexi's funeral, a dear friend, colleague of mine who is Apache, she said, I'm preparing, and I'm trying to think what term she used, but part of it was bundle, and I think she said something about a medicine healing bundle, which kind of brought up in my mind, you know, different tribes probably see bundles differently. And I think Amy just kind of referenced that as well. And there's kind of a contemporary sense that we can gather medicines that are helpful in particularly in sad situations, to give us strength and healing. And so I wasn't sure how to say thank you, or, you know, to receive it. And she told me, feel free to share. And in this medicine bundle, if that's the right term for it, was, let's see if I can remember, sweetgrass, chokecherry seeds, which she said could either be chewed or planted. It seems to me there were a couple of other items, but they were wrapped in a cloth. But, you know, if she knows her language, she speaks Apache. And, you know, I just went, oh my goodness, how thoughtful. But it just kind of says to me that, you know, there still are bundles being created. There are sacred ones, historical ones, however we should term it. And some of that is kind of what Gina referenced about how some people are kind of scary about even touching them, because they are, in a sense, medicine from a long ago era. And how that medicine was used might be a question. Would that be correct, Roger, in your research?
Well, I don't know about other communities, just little glimpses here and there. But, you know, I think that if the Pawnees ever proceed with any kind of project of this nature, that looking at what we can learn from people a century ago who said to themselves, our community is slipping away. Our children are going off to school. They want to play baseball. They don't want to go to ceremonies. Whatever it was they were saying, they ended up saying, we want our traditions to be preserved. We want to set down a record. And they worked very hard to do that. And so there are extensive records that can be consulted and studied for how they thought of these items, what they did, how they managed them, the systems they had. So there is that body of information that could be looked at and studied. I haven't really studied it very closely, just little dabs here and there. But then there's the other thing of we are a different people today. What are the differences that deserve to be institutionalized? New things that make a lot of sense that would help to preserve and pass along. The idea of being Pawnee, even if it's not the same as it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, still, what do we do today that we want to hand down tomorrow? And I just think that there needs to be a little bit of creativity there, but there needs to be, most importantly, a lot of dialogue among people. and plans made, and my plan, maybe it wasn't a very good plan, but at some point somebody will come up with some ideas that can be made to work somehow that will actually serve the community rather than, in some way burden people with fears that they have. As Gina and others have said, those fears, they're very real. Francis Morrissey did the best he could with what he had. He talked to people, they made a decision, and I respected that. I stepped back. I decided I would not pursue this then, but I wouldn't forget it either. And at some point, if people want to, bring these things to life, then, as you're saying, Lucille, it sure wouldn't hurt to look around and see what other communities do. What are they doing? What are their ideas about this? And I would hope that there would be some new visions about how to proceed with a future that makes sense.
And, what I take from that, Roger, is, that, particularly in large urban areas, like there are probably 300 tribal nations represented in Greater Denver. And I was at a blessing ceremony yesterday morning for the safe outdoor space that will be for Native people yesterday. And it was presided over by what is his first name? Lee Plennywolf. And, just watching him and what he did and whatnot, and thinking back what my friend Nancy Ray had sent to me in terms of medicines to make me strong. There was a lot of similarity there, but he's Oglala Lakota. And so I think there's a lot of potential blending and of, tribal ways. And I, talking about the contemporary and moving into a future that we, consult with one another, not just within our own nations, but with other associated nations too, that we all can learn from one another.
It seems like right now, Lucille, with you being on the grant fundraising committee and, with what recent conversations that we've had I'm on the land use committee. We really do need some plans. And, we don't have a tribal plan. Gina is well aware of this too. How can you go forward if you don't have any kind of goals set out for the next 5 years or the next 10 years? So that's what I think is really important, with our seed project. We're starting to see that, well, we have to plan for what we want to do for next few years down the road. And but yeah, I really would love to see that plan that you have, Roger, so Pat can lay his eyes on it and think about it. And, hopefully when we get all these thoughts together, we'll try to get the tribe to come up with their 5-year plans. So it'll make like Lucille's team a lot, easier to know what direction the tribe wants to move in. But kind of change the subject. I don't know how I ended up on this committee, but there's a land back committee in the Denver area, up even through Fort Collins and down through Colorado Springs, that are looking at trying to get back some just different sites along the Front Range for the people, the indigenous people to be able to go to these sites and use them how they want to use them. And um, so there, I kind of forget, because every time we meet, there's like a different number of tribes that they're trying to get information from. But I've heard the number as high as 29 different tribes that were indigenous to that area. And then they're talk about 19 at our last meeting. But the point is, you know, they're trying to work with the Fort Collins group and a group in around Boulder. And I don't know, Kenny Frost is on this committee. I don't know if you know Kenny. Did you work with him, sir, at the DIA?
I know Kenny, or I did long ago, and I'm trying to think if he was part of the youth delegations that I dealt with. I don't recall if he was, but yeah, he's been around and he's done various things. And when DIA was being built, he and Ava, they were on a committee there, and I went to a meeting or two with those guys. Didn't really do anything, but I don't know Kenny very well, but I know
Yeah.
who he is.
Well, I sure would like to forward my notes to someone, Lucille, Roger, someone that lives around there that might want to think over what they're trying to do with this land back. And because I kind of feel like I'm a little bit too removed from that area to offer much for the community that's living there now. So if you're open to an email on that subject, you know, I certainly will send it to you and Lucille.
You can do that if you want, Deb, and I'll certainly pass it along, but I understand there's a lot of dissension within that group. And the number of historical tribes of Colorado is 48. And research that Ernest House did when he was executive director of the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs. So.
And Lucille, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I just don't think it's widely accepted about the depth of the Pawnee connections to the Front Range and the Pikes Peak area, that there may be some kind of a sense of that. But, you know, when Walter and I and John Michael, Knife Chief, did a consultation at the Air Force Academy, they said that the reason why you're here is because some of these other communities that we're consulting with, they suggested, well, why don't you talk to the Pawnees? But I don't have a good sense of, you know, I think the Pawnee connection to this area is our ancestors lived here longer than anybody else along the Front Range. And I just don't think that is very much in the consciousness of anybody else.
You are absolutely right, Roger. And I talked to Carlton Gover a little bit about that last Saturday night when I saw him at the Rocky Mountain Indian Chambers event about the need to really delve into that education process because people don't know. And we need to get organized about how to not only make our own family better aware and informed, but also the broader audiences who need to know this information in Colorado. And, you know, I don't know how related, if at all, there is to this land back thing, which I think is kind of politically charged, which of course raises all kinds of red flags. in terms of how you get anything done. And Kenny Frost is in the middle of all this, and the Southern Utes have disavowed the connection to him, and I don't know what else going on. Somebody sent me an article, which I haven't read yet, where according to this article, I guess they separate themselves from Kenny Frost. So I don't know what's going on, and I got enough other stuff going on. I don't need to get in the middle of that, but I'm happy to pass along your information, Deb, to hopefully some people who know much more about that whole effort than I do.
Thank you.
Well, we've had quite a good discussion. Are there other comments or questions? I know we're past the 2 hour mark, so if people need to drop off, we understand that. But is there anyone else? Johan, are you still on here? I'm not seeing who all is still on, but yeah, his cousin Hilaire has had even when she was a girl, had a, well, she's my cousin, not. She's had a pretty strong spiritual antenna from even when she was a little girl, and she's got some stories, and I was wondering if she'd ever shared them with Johan about the bundle that was at the Morgans. Did she ever mention anything like that to you, Roger?
No, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I was going to tell Johan he ought to ask his mom if she hasn't told him those stories that he'd be interested to hear. Well, if there's no other comments, I'm gonna wrap the recording part of this up, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn the recording off.